I stand in support of these proposed rules. And I want to start off a little bit. At the end of every year, I think back on the year and what are my favorite days? And inevitably, they're me getting outside with my two girls. And I want to talk a little bit tell a story about one of those days. In Glacier Park, right next to the border of Canada, me and my two girls started at Swift Current Ranger Station. And the one thing to remember about this day is it was hot, 100 degrees, right next to Canada, along the Continental Divide. And we proceeded to hike into Bullhead Lake, Wilbur Mountain, Grinnell Mountain rising 3,000–4,000 feet above us on each side. Kind of one of the very many needed breaks, and my girls were maybe 8 and 10 at that time. We spotted some mountain goats on the mountainside and proceeded getting to the lake 4 or 5 miles in, I forget exactly, and breaking out our fishing gear. Girls wanted to catch some trout, and I'm all for that if they want to catch some trout. It was so hot, we literally, waded into our chests. And luckily there was kind of a gradual slant there right before the drop-off, so it was ideal. The trout are right after that drop-off. And sure enough, during that day we caught some trout, and they were still at the age where Dad takes the fish off the hooks, and I make sure that I showed them this trout and the coloration and the beauty and the fragility of this trout before I take it off, and we let those go that day. Maybe an hour or two into our fishing expedition, the biggest moose I've ever seen in my life strolls down, obviously to get out of the heat. And this wasn't a big lake, so a little bit scary for a parent, but it was far enough away and not showing any inclinations. But we actually got to watch that moose for 2–3 hours. It stayed in that water. Later on, 2 deer literally came right down to the lakeside within 10 yards of us. And at the time, it was obvious because of the heat. But it made for an unbelievable day. It's the kind of day as a parent, you want to connect your kids to something beautiful. My girls, my wife is Blackfeet by heritage. Glacier Park is part of those ancestral grounds, so they got to connect to that as well. It was a beautiful day. God's grace was on us. Wasn't until we were actually driving back out to the campsite that we actually saw a plume of smoke rising from the forest, which turned into a major forest fire. And it got me thinking a little bit. This is before I worked for National Wildlife Federation. This was such a great day. I'll remember it the rest of my life. My kids will remember it the rest of their lives. But are we screwing this up? It was 100 degrees right next to the Canadian border. Along the Continental Divide, literally the switchbacks going up to the Continental Divide were within 20 yards of where we were fishing. I just say that here because, I want to be able to protect for my kids' future, and if they have kids moving forward, that they're able to experience those same things. And as a planet, we're screwing things up and not allowing that kind of thing, and that's a travesty from a moral, ethical standpoint. America's natural heritage is something to be proud of, and we need to protect it. Looked a little bit more into the science, after that, and sure enough, Montana has heated up 2.3 degrees on average every year in the last 60 years. August, this was an August day. August precipitation has declined by 20%. And what does that do with the critters that we saw and hooked that day? Trout are really a poster child in the Northern Rockies for climate change. Trout need cold water, clean water, and a lot of it. And climate change impacts all those things. Obviously, the ambient air temperature being high impacts trout. The earlier runoff from the snowpack in the streams, at least, we were fishing a lake that day, reduces the amount of water in the streams late in the season, so the amount of water is impacted there. And then you look at the forest fires and all the siltation that causes, that impacts clean air. So that's how trout's impacted by climate change. You look at the moose. A couple of people have talked about moose already. I won't get in depth, but the heat stressors there and the ticks associated with the mild winters are really ravaging moose populations in Minnesota and the Northeast. Likely just a matter of time before they're headed to the Rocky Mountains. Those same problems with moose. Mountain goats. Another poster child. As temperatures increase, the montane forests are creeping up slope, pinching off the alpine areas where mountain goats, spend their time. And likely them, bighorn sheep, pikas are all going to be impacted. And then obviously Glacier Park is named after glaciers. They predict now here the latest science to say within 10, probably at most 20 years, Glacier Park will not have a glacier. that's a travesty. That's a heritage site for not just America but the world. That being said, here there's a number of organizations that have recognizing these concerns and these impacts to wildlife in our natural world that have jumped into this. National Wildlife Federation, for which I work, it's a key component of what we do. Other sportsmen's groups created a Season's End campaign, basically along the same thing, to educate sportsmen about the impacts of climate change. Trout Unlimited, Ducks Unlimited, Pheasants Forever all belong to that organization. The Wildlife Society, organization of wildlife professionals, has put out papers on it. This is an important, an important topic if we're going to protect our natural world for our children. And it's not just kind of a recreational issue. It's not just a spiritual issue. It's more than that too. I mean, the economics of a lot of areas are tied to the outdoor recreation. Montana, that's one of the leading. Other than agriculture, it's the second leading economic driver in the state right now here. In the United States, just hunting, fishing, wildlife viewing generates $122 billion worth of expenditures each year. That's a significant component to our country's economy and something that really meshes with our outdoor way of life that we have in many parts of it. That being said, as I applaud the EPA for this proposal. It's a significant step in the right direction. I think if we were really to tackle a problem, we might need to, after this, go after existing power plants and propose some kind of standards there as well here. But this is a really good, solid step, and I sure appreciate it.
Thank you.